It's 6:45 according to Fitbit. That one's wrong again.
Is there a motion to go in closed session?
Yes, sir.
Second.
Second.
Be it resolved, the Montgomery County Board of Supervisors of Montgomery County, Virginia hereby enters into closed meeting for the purpose of discussing the following. Section 2.2-3711, consultation with legal counsel and briefing from staff members or consents pertaining to actual or proposed legalization where such, what's that say? Consultation or briefing in open meeting would adversely affect the negotiation or litigation procedure of the public body in consultation with legal counsel. Employment or retained by the public body regarding specific legal matters requiring provision of legal advice by such counsel. Montgomery County, Virginia versus Purdue Pharmaceutical opioid litigation. Madam Secretary, call roll, please.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Is there a motion to come out of closed session?
So moved.
Second.
Whereas the Board of Supervisors of Montgomery County has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provision of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas Section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the board that such closed meetings was conducted in conformity with Virginia laws. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Supervisors of Montgomery County, Virginia hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempt from open meetings requirements by Virginia laws were discussed in the closed meeting, to which this certification resolution applies, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion conveyed the closed meetings were heard, discussed, or considered by the board. Madam Secretary, call roll, please.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Mr. Kowski?
Aye.
Chair King?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Mr. Chair and board members, at this point, if we could rise for a moment of silence, and then I'll lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Let us pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Board members, our first item on the agenda this evening is a presentation. Mr. Dan Brew is here to provide us an update from the MPO on the Valley to Valley Trail Initiative. Dan, come on down.
I like this.
Glad to have you here.
Sorry about last time. No excuse other than I was off and I forgot it. Hopefully it's another 46 years. That's how long it's been since I missed the last meeting. I want to give you a little update on where we are now. It's actually better that I'm here tonight instead of 2 weeks ago because there was a meeting in Roanoke today about the trail and how to proceed with that. First of all, I'll give you a little overview of how we got to where we are now. Of course, the Board of Supervisors is the one that spearheaded this last year, and about a year ago hosted a meeting here for interested localities and state officials, and about pursuing a connection between the Roanoke River Greenway and the New River Trail State Park. And during one of those presentations by the guy that's in charge of trails for VDOT in Richmond, I heard him mention that VDOT had done two rather large studies similar to what we were looking for out here. One was Capitol Trail in Northern Virginia, and Birthplace of America Trail in Eastern Virginia, in Williamsburg and Hampton Roads. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe that's something they would do, and since they were doing those and funding those out of state planning and research funds, no local funds required. So I brought that up at the MPO in March, and the board adopted a resolution requesting VDOT to conduct the study, and we got supporting resolutions from the New River Regional Commission, the Roanoke Allegheny Regional Commission, and the Roanoke TPO. So it was a pretty concerted effort for those entities. And we sent that along, and it pretty much, we had one meeting probably in May to see where to go, and since then there's been no contact from VDOT. And so I called and checked on it about 3 weeks ago, and we are all assuming right now that VDOT is going to do the study. I do not have any official reply to the request from the MPO, but they wanted to schedule a meeting with their consultant that's going to conduct the study, and that was this morning. So I can give you some information hot off the press, and the consultant that will be doing it will be Michael Baker International, and the project manager, their project manager, is a guy named Nick Britton, who worked with the Department of Rail and Public Transportation and was assigned to the New River MPO. So he's a known quantity to us. And the project manager for VDOT is Shane Sawyer, and he worked for years at the Roanoke Allegheny Regional Commission, and I worked with him at representing Montgomery County on the MPO down there. So they're two known quantities, they know the area, and I think that's a good thing, a good place to start. So where we are now is that they want to develop a framework document, which is originally I thought we were just setting up a study scope, but it's a much more involved document, which includes what they're going to study, alternatives, who's going to provide what they're going to give back to us, and a timeline. The study goal starting out is to connect existing trails to form a cohesive network. And those involve Roanoke River Greenway, New River Trail, and the Huckleberry Trail. Those are the big three. Certainly, we're going to be looking at tying into Radford's system as well. So between now and probably the end of the year, we'll be developing that document. It'll have to be reviewed and approved by the study team, which right now is going to be the two MPOs and the two regional commissions, VDOT and the consultant. It will require all localities involved can expect to be contacted in the next month or so, because there are things that are going to have to be supplied. They'll have to come from the planning departments, GIS departments. And so we'll try to put that together and approve it, hopefully by the end of the year, and start the actual study in January. And it's expected to take 11 to 12 months. And they would like to come out of that with a recommendation. However, if there are several alternatives they look at that are similar, then it may be two. They're going to, one good thing I think, which helps the localities, is they're going to split it up into segments, so that if you want to proceed with one segment, then okay, you've got all the information you need to start with. They're going to do extensive environmental work, so that we don't run in, if you pick the project up and proceed with it, you aren't met immediately with, oh, we can't do that because we're going through wetlands, or we're endangering the Roanoke log perch, or the coneflowers, which I remember from the Smart Road very well. So that's what they want to head off. I think they've got a very good approach, and we'll certainly keep all the localities apprised, but they're going to have a lot of contact for the next year from the consultant. One of the things that VDOT looks for, and it might be of interest to you all in considering future needs, is when they spend a considerable amount of money doing a study, is they don't want to see it sitting around forever and not ever being implemented. So they will give some different funding options, and some of them are going to require local matches, some of them are not. But we'll have all those options. But the board should keep that in the back of your mind, that somewhere we're starting a process, and it's going to be a lengthy one, but we need to try to finish. So I'll answer any questions. I think I've told you everything I know, but I'll answer any questions anybody has.
Go ahead, Steve.
Except for Steve.
That's because you know I'm going to get tough. No, easy ones. You said something about, you said they may come up with a couple of alternatives. Do you mean in the path that it would take?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
The difficult area, you're well aware of it, is how do we get up the mountain?
Exactly.
And it may be an approach that goes to Blacksburg, it may be an approach that goes to Christiansburg, who knows? Somewhere in between. But they're going to look at all that and give us some ideas.
Well, I think it's fantastic news that things are going to get rolling on it, and that'll give you almost a year to work your magic and find us all the money that we need too.
Well, y'all will be very happy that I was awake during that part of the meeting.
Thanks, Dan.
I know it might be early to ask this question, but you said that they would be reaching out and possibly contacting planning and GIS. How would we remain informed of the process as it's ongoing? Would you be a liaison to us, possibly?
Well, that'll be mainly in data supply for them to do their work. Certainly, we're going. The four entities are going to be the ones that oversee the study, but there's going to be a stakeholder group that involves all the localities, and as well as other governmental agencies and any other group that might be interested. So they will do that with the stakeholders, and certainly any updates. I'll be sure that my localities get information on that. And if you need me to come back at any time, I can.
Great, and I think it would be, I think there's more than one of us that would be interested in serving on a stakeholder group because there's a lot of interest on this board about moving this forward. When we first started talking about this well over a year ago, I looked at it as maybe a 2-decade goal. Do you think that based on the conversations that you've been having and what you've been hearing, is that still realistic to think about it as something that could occur within 2 decades, maybe a decade?
I think that's a reasonable, time frame. And I think having them split it up into segments where you can see what planning level cost estimate is and what the advantages are and the disadvantages are of each section. I think that's going to be very helpful to the board making decisions. Because certainly the big part of that that we have virtually no information on is in Montgomery County.
All right. Well, thank you very much for bringing this information forward. This is very, very encouraging. I'm really excited to hear this update and look forward to hearing from you again soon with even more information.
Well, I was glad to hear that we were setting a meeting up, even though I never got anything saying they were going to do the study.
One of the things that you had mentioned is that there would be matching funds. So it would be important for a locality to start setting aside some funds to be able to access those matching funds. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, certainly, revenue sharing is part of the equation and as well as your transportation alternative program. But, in using the revenue sharing, that can be an offset to a smart scale request. And, reduces the funding, it runs your benefit score up. Emily can probably give you more information on smart scale. But yeah, I think it's crucial that you keep that in mind. That somewhere, we made out pretty good getting to study for free. But when we implement, it's going to require some local funding.
Thank you very much.
Supervisor Biggs?
How much local funding? How much local funding?
Well, it just depends. Like I say, there's going to be several different pools of things you can do. Some of them require match, some of them don't. Mm-hmm. If you do revenue sharing and you get that, then you can use that for your smart scale application to reduce the total cost of the project. So that's been used quite effectively in some other localities. When we get some cost estimates, some planning level cost estimates, and you can see where you want to start, then you know a number that you got to come up with. But it's going to be something,
I was thinking ahead to budget planning. That's what I was thinking ahead to. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate everything that you've done with this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bring up any more? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate all your work. Board members, our next presentation this evening is a report from the treasurer on the delinquent real estate tax collections projects. And I believe Mr. Reif is here this evening to join us. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Had to get some technical help.
That's all right.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I wanted to take a moment to just briefly introduce Paul LaBar, who's another attorney in our office. And I've been coming to court mostly for us, but Paul's going to help me out, and he and I will be tag teaming as we move forward. But on occasion, we wanted to come and give the board an update on how the tax collections are going. So that's what we were hoping to do here tonight. So this is the standard report you've seen us provide in the past, just showing what the collections are like. One of the big changes that we have on here is we're reporting not only the real estate but also the personal property taxes, which we had a recent turnover from the treasurer's office, and we've been working just about a little over a month on collecting on 2014 personal property taxes. Now the 2014 personal property taxes also include if they owe 2014 taxes, we also receive that individual's 15s and 16s and 17s. So we just call those tag-alongs. That way we're not having to bifurcate the collections. So, but you'll see to date that we do have a good result on the stair-step graph coming in from the last 12 months on real estate, and you can see on the stair-step we also indicate the personal property that's broken out that we're collecting. Overall, for all of the real estate that we have, we're in court on just about 70% of all of the real estate that we moved it through the litigation, into the litigation pipeline on 70% of all your real estate. We do have about 50 cases that are lined up and they're coming through the court system now. So we expect we'll have those coming up shortly. But in addition, for the real estate taxes, we're collecting 2016 and older real estate taxes. So there are in addition, that not included in this report, tax payments that are paid into the Treasurer's office that aren't reported as a part of my collections that my office is doing. So in addition to the real estate collections that we're reporting, we've also had some local payments that were made to the Treasurer's office for 2017 and 2018 taxes, and that's an additional $168,000 that was paid in. So the total that's been paid in so far for tax penalty and interest to the county is $575,352. So we're very proud of that, and we're going to continue with these efforts. Obviously, we've been moving through the court process. We do have, so far we've had one judicial tax sale and we've had two non-judicial tax sales. We wanted to put up some early movement, and it takes a little while to move them through the courts. So we did have one non-judicial sale, which are small parcels, not going to plug any budget holes or give you any matching funds for projects like we just heard about. But we wanted to get those moving. The taxes are delinquent, so we try to pair the non-judicial sales up with judicial sales to try to increase the overall collections that we can get on those. So we have an upcoming auction coming up on November 15th at 1 p.m. We appreciate the county allowing us to use this room here to conduct the auctions. It takes the weather out of the equation, and which can sometimes stifle the number of people that want to come out and stand out in the rain or in the cold. We have 11 properties that are to be sold. That was going to be 15, but 4 of them are excluded from the sale. We had an appeal to the Supreme Court for one of the cases that had 4 properties. So that petition for appeal was just filed, so we're going to be handling that for the Treasurer's office through the Supreme Court. And it is it's an individual that filed the appeal, not represented by counsel. So always like to give you a good idea of what the backlog looks like of the real estate that we're working on. So as you can see, the 1998-99 taxes, the 99 taxes, if you average that out on those 33 accounts, it works out to about $78 per account. We are working those and putting those in with the rest of them. We're trying to preserve the statute of limitations and make sure that we collect everything we can for you. But we're whittling them down. The personal property, you'll notice that the personal property has a 5-year statute of limitations, but we do have some older accounts that are out there that were reduced to judgment, which we're also collecting on those. So they get the same treatment that we would give any of them that are not yet in the the statute hasn't run out on yet. So as I said, we're collecting on the 2014 taxes, and these were just recently placed in our office. We do like to send a letter to the individual before we bring them in on a summons to answer interrogatories or start looking for lien sources or take them to court. So we're going to try to reduce some of these 14s to a judgment, but certainly we're going to bring them in on administrative processes as quickly as we can before the statute runs out on the 2014s. So I know you have a long agenda. I just wanted to be brief, just give you an update on where we are with the collections. Happy to answer any questions the board might have.
Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, can we get a copy of that?
Yes, absolutely. I think I provided a copy here. You mean just the PowerPoint presentation?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, I can ask Vicki to get you a
Thank
copy.
you.
Any questions?
So it's great for an update. Thank you very much, and thank you for all your hard work. Do you have any estimate of what, in the end, it might be? Now that you've been working on it for so long, you might have an idea.
You mean as far as the regular
The full
payments that are coming in?
Yeah, the full amount that you might be able to recover for us.
Well, on the real estate, we should be able to recover, the only ones that we're not usually able to recover everything that's due are the non-judicial sales, and those are typically small. But from a real estate perspective, we should be able to collect, eventually well over 90%. Right now, we're sitting at a 43% collection. After this auction represents about another 10% of the real estate that's due, so we should be able to collect, bump that up over 50% that's been collected. And as new turnover comes in, the collection percentage is going to go down. So as new debt comes in, it's going to take your overall collection percentage down a little bit, but we'll keep going with it. The personal property, after a month of collection on the severely old accounts, and after 1 month we're sitting at 3%. I'm tickled with that number. The personal property is mobile, depreciation. The assets are mobile; they're depreciating in value. So your collection percentage will not be nearly as high on that as it is at the real estate that doesn't move and generally always appreciates. But for the real estate, we should be able to collect almost everything that's due to you. But it's a rolling process because every year you're going to have new delinquencies that come up.
And then my last question is, maybe Mr. Meadows can confirm or not, but perhaps do we receive the proceeds on a regular basis? How does the money actually get into our coffers?
Sure. Well, we don't hold on to the funds for an extended period of time. You all can do a whole lot better job of spending your money than I could. So we remit our funds weekly, on a weekly basis as they come in. Now, we hold them for a 10-day clearance period to make sure that what we're sending you is good funds. That just keeps the accounting easy between the treasurer's office and ours. I do think that we're sending a check down currently. Okay, so we send them by ACH along with an electronic report. That electronic report, it can be loaded straight up into the Munis system, so we're not taking up county staff having to key in those figures. So, but the judicial sales take a little bit more time because we have to, once we sell the property, we have to report back to the court what the sale results were. Once the court confirms it and we get the funds in, those are issued by paper check because we have to pay all the costs and we have to pay the tax penalty and interest, and so those come out by paper check and not by wire.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just to clarify so I understand the process, on the last two slides that you showed us for the real estate and the personal property tax, it looked like in both around 14 that there was a pretty large increase in the amount that was delinquent. Is that just due to the collection process, or? Well,
so on the real estate, this is a picture perfect model. You'll typically see it low on the older years, and it's going to increase as it gets to newer years. On the personal property, the reason that you see something like, you see almost like a bell curve, is because we're only collecting on the 2014s were the key year that was turned over to us. So it's the fifth year, and we wanted to start the process, get our processes down between our office and the treasurer's office and the commissioner of revenue's office, because what ends up happening is we track folks down and they say, well, I moved a long time ago, or I sold that vehicle. And we let them know what they need to do to go into the commissioner's office to have those records changed. So it's a good idea to dip your toe into the water before you jump right in. And that's how we're treating this, just to make sure we have all the processes down.
And that's kind of what I assumed. I didn't want to make an assumption then be incorrect. I assumed that it was just showing that increase around 14, 15 just because older ones are resolved and we're working towards resolution on the rest of them.
That's right.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
More questions?
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I do appreciate your all's time.
Thank you very much.
I believe Helen's going to give us an update on the personal property taxes.
Yes. I did want to say a couple of words about the collection overall. From February 1 to September 30th, we have collected a little over $5 million in real estate and personal property delinquent taxes. And that's $2.7 million of real estate and $2.3 million of personal property. And that's $1.7 million more than we collected the same period last year. So we are taking delinquent collections serious. And on the real estate, of course, I think having the auctions now is letting people know that we are serious about collecting the taxes. Taxes doing a really good job with the collection efforts that they're doing along with the real estate auctions. And then on the personal property, as interim treasurer, I couldn't appoint a chief deputy. So by that happening, we had some vacancy savings money from the state level. So I used $9,199 of that in June to do a final tax notice. And with that $9,199 cost, we collected $942,743 in personal property taxes. Because that notice was on pink paper, and it said, if you don't pay these, you're going to get turned over for collection. And so and also there was $67,633 was abated, like John said, of people that had moved, had not updated things with DMV and so forth. So when they got those notices, they contacted the commissioner's office, got those assessments off the books to where we know that that money's not ours to collect. So all total, there's a little over $1 million that has been either collected or has been abated. But it was $942,743 that was collected. And then I did turn over some accounts after I sent out that final tax notice, giving people fair warning, gave them a couple of months to pay. Then we did turn over the 2014 to tax to collect. And along with that, if they owe 14, then they're also collecting through 18 if they owe any of those years. And that just keeps it more streamlined of not having to deal with, well, we need to pay so many years to the treasurer's office, so many years to tax, then they pay everything to tax and they remit it to us. And so we're very pleased with the collections going forward, and we're going to stay on top of getting the taxes collected because that helps fund the budget, also helps keep taxes lower for everyone. So appreciate it. Does anyone have any questions?
Anybody have any questions?
Yeah. Helen, do you have a contract with tax that has a beginning and an end, or is it just continuing from year to year? Is that how it works?
Not really sure.
I might be able to answer that. So our standard contracts don't really have a term because we're attorneys and we can be fired at the treasurer's whim.
Right.
So it's and that's a long-standing principle that a client should always have a right to seek representation from whomever.
Could you step over to the mic?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So just to repeat, our contracts don't typically have a term simply because our clients could terminate our contract at any time. There's an absolute right to recall accounts with, there's no penalty if the treasurer recalls them. So it's one effort to make sure that we continue doing a good job for our clients.
Okay. Yeah, and thank you for spending $9,000 to get us $900,000. I think that's a pretty good return.
I thought it was a good return.
Thank you.
And we are very happy with tax and their collection efforts. And part of it is the fact that we can do everything automated. We can send files to them with all the information. They take it and do what they need to do to send out notices. Then we get a lockbox file and the wire transfer from them, and we import that into Munis, so we don't have to do any manual processing. So it is a very smooth process that we do.
Anybody have any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ellen. Board members, that concludes our presentations portion of the agenda. Our next item on the agenda is public hearings. We have public hearings that were advertised in the New River Valley section of the Roanoke Times on October 4th, October 13th, and October 20th. And these are for 3 agricultural and forest districts. Rather than read all the detail, I'll just tell you that District 1 is in the Price's Fork area. District 2 is in the Catawba Mount Tabor area. And District 15 is in the Taylor Hollow area. And I'll recognize Emily to take it from there.
Good evening. As Craig mentioned, we are going to be looking at 3 renewals. They're pretty straightforward because, as you guys know, by the time it gets to you, the AFD committee has met on it, the planning commission has met on it, and so it's pretty much in a neat package that we'll go over with you guys tonight. All 3 are on their regular 8-year renewal process. So at the beginning of the slides, we just had a little bit of information about how AFD information is in both our county code and the Code of Virginia, and it just talks about the importance of agriculture and forestry in the Commonwealth, and that's why this sort of protection element exists. And the code does say that it gives the local governing body some authority to continue, modify, or terminate, and so we are going to be looking at continuing tonight. And then that will be based on compliance with 2-147 in our code. And these, we had very few additions, so most of these have been in for some time, and we'll touch on those. The first we'll look at is Price's Fork, which is AFD1, originally formed in 1980. Had its renewal in 2011. As it exists today is just over 1,100 acres with 7 landowners. We are looking at 621 acres coming out and a renewal of 556. If you look at the maps that we provided in your packet, you can see everything that's green is renewing and everything that is this pink color is covered in the withdrawal. So we'll talk about those areas. If you're looking at these areas using just this our pictometry imagery, you can see most of these are forested. This is the Frith property, which is off Glade Road. And then the Walnut Springs to Glade Road area is mostly farmland. The requested withdrawals were from the Walls as well as New River Land Trust. I think, yeah, we have a zoom on those. So the pink area here is the Wall family withdrawals. You can see those all right there in or near our village. And as you know, all under a significant amount of development pressure. So at this time, the Walls did not want to renew for 8 years. The other piece of property is owned currently by the New River Land Trust. This is the property that was acquired with the grant that we discussed last year, and they are not renewing. For AFD2, Catawba Mount Tabor, this was our larger district. Again, originally formed in 1980, renewed appropriately in 2011. Currently 6,639 acres and a total of 62 landowners. You can see most of those are being renewed. We also have 89 acres that are being added, but a total of 528.89 are being withdrawn. And that still gives us a very strong District 2 with over 6,000 acres. So if you look at the map here, you can see everything that's green. We specifically got a renewal request for. You can see everything that's yellow was added, and what those additions typically are is a property owner was already in the district and acquired a new parcel at some point since the district was last renewed, so they want to add their other parcel in. So that's what those additions were. The gray areas were no official responses, but if no one specifically asked to be renewed, it has been working with the county attorney, the county's policy that if they weren't specifically asked for withdrawal, they are renewed in the cycle. So those are being renewed. They're in the gray, but we just colored them slightly differently. And then the pink, again, are shown for withdrawal in this district. So you can see throughout this district, which is a little larger, you're going to see both agriculture and forestry properties. And we did the breakdown here. These are the citizens that are doing withdrawals. Again, that's just over 528 acres. You can see that's this particular area that incorporates the McPherson property as well as the Catawba Swine Center property. This is the Fugate. These were additions, as I mentioned, these people already in the district and adding those. This is right at the Roanoke County line. The Bates property being added there in yellow to those other shaded properties, again, already owned by the Bates. Same here with the Tribble property. And so this is just sort of a reminder of what our District 2 looks like. And AFD 15, known as our Taylor Hollow, formed in 1995, did have a 2011 renewal, 353 acres, only 3 owners, and no requested changes. So just goes to show fewer owners, you get greater participation, and this is what that district looks like. And from the air, this is what that district looks like. So you get a sense of, again, all forestry property. It did go to AFD committee in early October. There was a unanimous recommendation for the renewal as presented. And then at the Planning Commission's public hearing, again, there were no comments. And the commission agreed with the recommendation to you all for its renewal as presented for districts 1, 2, and 5. They all had conditions on them when they were established, and those have been carried forward. So later in your agenda, if you wanted to pick them up, those resolutions are updated with new dates and information, but we carried those same conditions forward that have been with the districts. That is all I have. Unless you have questions for me, we can open it here.
I got just one quick one, Emily, because I don't understand how that works. If somebody wanted to come into the AFD program, can they do it in the middle of the 8-year term or any portion thereof, or do they have to wait till it?
They would have to wait until
Okay.
it was in cycle.
Okay. That answers my second question too, so thank you.
Although some owners do own enough property to create their own district. So if they could meet those thresholds, which aren't very large, we could create a new district.
Supervisor.
The parcel that's in pink for the New River Land Trust, right beside it is a green. Do they own that too, or is that somebody else?
It's a different owner.
Okay, that's all.
Thank you, sir. Any more questions? Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
This is a public hearing, but this is a public hearing, but no one has signed up to speak on this issue. However, if anyone would like to speak, you're welcome to come to the podium, state your name and address, and you have 5 minutes on these AFD renewals.
Seeing no one, we'll move forward to the next one.
Board members, our next item on the agenda this evening is public address. This is the opportunity for citizens in attendance to come forward and address the board on any matter. The board does not respond to comments. They are only here to listen. Each citizen has up to 5 minutes to speak. We do have one citizen who has signed up, and then after that, others are welcome to speak. The first citizen to sign up this evening is Mr. Bob Poff.
Good evening, everyone. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, I'd like to thank you for accommodating my request at a previous meeting for an engineer to look at the Fligger building. And I appreciate Mr. Meadows and Mr. Woodrum keeping me informed during that process. I'd also like to thank you for considering saving the former sheriff's office that's in your agenda for later this evening. As you'll recall from a previous presentation, that building dates back to 1877 or before, and that has historical significance. Also, at that previous presentation, we pointed out that the references in the many references in the county comp plan to preservation of historic structures. In regards to the Fligger building, I hope you've had time to go back to the video of Mr. Murphy's and Mr. Limble's presentation from the last meeting. The majority of what was said was positive. Some of those comments was Very heavy structure, good bones, good foundation, some rot, but not excessive. Leaks was not unusual, and so forth. Mr. Legal indicated that the wood was old growth, which is stronger than modern lumber and true size. In regards to the brickwork, contrary to what has been repeated since that meeting, he did not say that all the mortar needed to be replaced. He said there was areas, as we all knew, where the mortar is missing or has been repaired with improper materials. These areas are very limited, and his statement agrees with the email you were provided earlier from the Virginia Department of Historic Resources. There was mention of the need to beef up the roof structure. I checked with Jerry Henline, the building official for the town of Christiansburg, and he stated that the roof structure meets the code regarding the snow load based on Mr. Liebel's verbal representation to me of that design, and also due to the fact that it is an existing building. Unless the use is changed from office building, he would accept the roof design as it stands now. So we don't have to worry about beefing it up. The snow load requirements doesn't increase until you get over to Corning. So you that live in Blacksburg must have heavier snows than we do in Christiansburg. Mr. Liebel mentioned the repairs and coating could get another 10 to 20 years of life for the present roof, but no problem. His firm is actually participating in a study for one of those coatings to see if it will last 50 years. He gave me an estimate of $3 to $3.50 a square foot, and that equates to $7,800 to $9,100 for repairs to the roof, not the $100,000 that was mentioned in discussions at the last meeting. And it should also be noted that on membrane roofs I've had installed, I've never been able to get one more than a 20-year warranty on such a roof. So you're almost getting the same from coating the existing roof there. While we do not have an estimate on the brickwork, based on my experience with another historic building, I believe it would be in the $6,000 to $7,500 range, certainly less than $10,000. I'm sure you agree that the building is not in danger of falling down. This may have been the thought process prior to the engineering report. The demolition costs will run, I've heard several numbers, $60,000 to $100,000. I believe that you could spend much, much less than the lower number by putting a coating on the roof, stopping the water infiltration, ventilating the building with the warm, dry air that's in the attic, and save the building for another generation. A decision to demolish the building is an irreversible decision and one that should not be made hastily. Mr. Liebel's written report was not delivered to the county until late this morning, and I doubt you've had time to review it. Nor have I had time to study it in depth in order to respond in a more complete manner. While you may not see the need for a building today, there most likely will be one in the future. I urge you not to make an irreversible decision, but instead vote to make repairs to the building so the future board can take the next step in making this a productive building. The building is important, and that's the oldest government building in the county. It has architectural importance from its design. But also there's a historic significance to the history of this county, state, and country for the men who worked and served in that building. The building's on the National Register of Historic Places, and the preservation of historic structures is in the county comp plan. Historic buildings have authenticity, and people are drawn to historic downtowns. In regards to sustainability, the greenest buildings are the ones we already have. On a final note, I do not believe being adjacent to the jail is a detriment. On a daily basis, I see out-of-state cars across the street at Antiques on Main, at the cafe, the properties at the center of the town, and there may be opportunities for a public-private partnership in bringing this building back to life. Your positive consideration of saving both these buildings is appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, that's all we had signed up, but if there's anyone else interested in speaking to the board on any matter, please come forward, state your name and address, and you have 5 minutes.
Seeing no one, we'll close public address.
Mr. Chair, we have no addendum this evening.
No addendum. consent agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Is any discussion? Madam Secretary, call roll, please.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Bowden?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Mr. Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Chair King?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair and board members, at this point, we have a work session. If there could be a motion and second, we'll move into work session to discuss a couple of road items.
So moved.
Second.
Madam Secretary, call roll, please.
Ms. Bowden?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Mr. Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Chair King?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Thank you.
We have Emily back to the podium for us. A couple of six-year secondary road improvement roads, and then a discussion of VDOT Smart Scale. Thank you.
So my presentation is just going to track along with your agenda order, and it's not very long. So all these are pretty straightforward, but we want to make sure we give you guys the opportunity to hear the information and ask any questions or have discussion before we take any actions. So the first item is consideration for Poplar Hollow Road to be added to our 6-year plan. For those of you who are on the Road Viewers Tour or just like to take drives around the county, you've seen Poplar Hollow Road, but this sort of gives you a snapshot of where it's located on our vicinity map. The entire road is 1.3 miles. That is in the VDOT system. I confirmed that with VDOT. You guys did view it on the Road Viewers Tour back in June, based on a recommendation from Supervisor Fidzikowski. In speaking with VDOT staff, just to get the information together, to make sure we were following the appropriate procedure and to review it with you all, there was concurrence from VDOT staff. They have quite a few calls for service out that area. They have some ideas in mind of how they would like to work on it if it was added. So they did agree that it was a good candidate project, as does staff. And the second image I have just shows you where you would turn off at 460 there, 11-460, then you see the road is shown there in green. The entire length is the area being proposed for addition. And that is all I have for you. Just so you know, we have this and another 6-year plan addition proposal. After we review them and discuss them this evening, should you want to take action, there are resolutions in your packet, and because you've already had your 6-year hearing, they're eligible to be added by those resolutions this evening.
Thank you.
Any questions on Poplar Hollow Road? Okay. The next road discussion is for Union Valley. You'll be pleased to know this is not the entire road. It'll be this portion, which you can see is located near the Pilot Road intersection. And I think we've identified this as, I forget the exact length of this, but the length covers an area where we're having some recurrent flooding issues. These are larger than what just maintenance can handle. And they've been doing sort of patchwork over the last few years. They're familiar with this area's flooding. In 2 cycles, we've put together full applications for revenue sharing, and that has not been funded. So in brainstorming with our local VDOT residency staff, it was the recommendation of David and Chris to potentially add this to the 6-year plan, so we can try to receive funding that way. These improvements would be slightly different, so usually we're talking about surface treating and things like that. In this case, it's some grading and slope issues and then piping so that the water isn't sort of rushing down and overtaking the ditch area. It's got some culvert issues, some other items, and they're well aware of them, and they already have an idea of how they want to do the repairs. So, and just to let you see the area here, you can see again Pilot Road there, and so this is just this portion of Union Valley that's a little further down. Any questions on this?
Is this portion one of the roads in the county that when it floods, it kind of strands people or makes it very difficult for people to pass and ambulances and fire trucks to come through?
There is water on the road, which we certainly never like to see standing water on the road because, you know, we tell everyone to turn around. So while it probably is passable in the truer sense of the word, we don't encourage anyone, which means that you would need to reroute. And if you're in this part of the county, rerouting is not that convenient. And then if you're also not familiar with this part of the county and you come upon the standing water, it could have a lot of safety implications too.
Thank you.
I want to thank you because I know both of us been working on this for a while.
Yes, Union Valley has definitely been in our thoughts for a while.
Thank you.
That's all I have on both of the 6-year items. So we can move on to the Smart Scale update. It's not a very large update, but we are sort of taking a different approach, and staff wants to just run those by you. So we have applied for Smart Scale funding in 2 of the last 3 rounds. We have had nothing score well enough to obtain funding, and so we decided to take a step back and see what maybe other localities were doing in order to get successful projects and scores. Because it's not just projects in Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads getting the funding. There's district funding and there's state funding. So within our district, there's funds available to us. So what could we do differently? Our plan right now is to keep all of our existing projects. We think they're all good candidate projects. We think that they impact a lot of our commuting traffic and our local traffic in general. The plan would be to keep those projects, but to break them apart into smaller projects. So if they got approval, they would still be functional and stand alone on their own. But instead of being larger, more expensive projects, they could be smaller and stand alone. We looked at definitely some localities that were very successful with that last year, and so that was sort of the approach we decided to take. And I gave you an example. As you all know, completely overhauling the intersection at Pepper's Ferry and Price's Fork is one of our projects, and it sets it up so that we could eventually look at 3 or 4 lanes on Pepper's Ferry, but it would improve the functionality of the intersection. We're looking at maybe breaking that left turn lane as a standalone project, and maybe the right turn lane and pedestrian improvement are a separate project, so that we could, if we just got the left turn lane onto Bryce's Fork, that's a great improvement. No one would be sad about that, but the cost would be significantly lower. The reason being on that project, one of our largest costs is the grade issue for the pedestrian improvement. If you're familiar with it at all, you know it slopes way down. So you have grade issues, you have drainage issues, all sorts of items that throw our estimate way up. Recently, the CTV talked about some updates. Basically, they're going to be shortening their intake, so we'll have a month to get it in. They'll have 2 months to screen it. We can put up to 5 in for pre-application, see how they screen, and then make the selection on which 4 would be our final. They've not provided any guidance on how interstate projects are going to be handled, and I thought that's just an interesting tidbit because we haven't obviously submitted any 81 projects, but if they start pulling some of those projects out of funding, would that mean there's going to be more funding available for some of these smaller non-interstate projects? So we're kind of keeping our ears open for that. But we wanted to share this approach because if we use the example that we just talked about, that's 2 projects if we submitted both of those in that one district. And you'll notice by looking at our 3 projects, we are sort of geographically diverse, and we tried to split them up. But with a max of 4, we could very quickly, we could have a single project turn into 3 smaller projects. And that would be a little bit of a different approach than what we've talked with you guys about before. So I just wanted to run it by. We will use the feedback we get from the pre-screening on what we think we could get money for as how we will proceed. With our main goal, just get some money, see some of these projects move along. Do you guys have any questions about this proposal or any reservations about it?
I have just one, and it's really about the project on at Price's Fork and Pepper's Ferry. You said you're going to do pedestrian. Where would the pedestrians go? Because there's no sidewalks out there.
So there is a sidewalk if you go all the way up to Forest Hills and Dollar General, that area.
Okay.
And so then you have a lot of non-drivers that walk from that area to the convenience store. And there's just a very slim area where that guardrail is, and this sort of what we call a goat path. It doesn't actually have anything to do with goats, but it's, worn down. And so that area being identified to be widened and all weather surface.
Okay, I was just curious. I was trying to make that connection in my head.
On somebody who, I travel, live in Walton, travel on a daily basis, you see people even walking past the Dollar General on down to Christie's on a regular basis.
Informally, staff pays a lot of attention, and we're keeping record if anyone's been through there and not seen a pedestrian. And so far, we see one every time we go through. So we think that's an important element.
Well, and if what you're hoping to gain is just the board's support, and I'll speak for myself in saying that I really appreciate you looking at this in comparison to other projects that were being funded and examining how we could better apply and get funding. And as for it, 2 of the 4 projects being in the same district, or 3 or 4, all of the projects being in the same district, I appreciate that you're looking at the areas in Montgomery County as a whole that need those types of improvements. So I think it's a great way to approach solving the problem of having large projects that are getting no funding. How do we, even if we're breaking them into smaller pieces, if that gives us a better chance of getting funding, I think that that's really great. Thanks for putting the work in to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would, if I could add to that as well, Emily and I will be meeting with our Commonwealth Transportation Board member, Dr. Smoot, on Wednesday to talk about projects in Montgomery County. Also pick his brain a little bit on how we can do better with some of our applications and stand a greater chance. Also on Wednesday, if anyone's interested, the Fall Transportation meeting of VDOT is in Roanoke at 4 o'clock that afternoon at the Holiday Inn Valley View. I'm sure we'll have some semblance there at that meeting, but we're going to talk to Dr. Smoot about that on Wednesday as well.
What we really find is a lot of things that are getting funding are already in bad condition. And I think what we're trying to do is sort of get ahead. And honestly, that's why we're not scoring that well. But we still think it's a good approach. We don't have the traffic problems that some of our neighbors in the Commonwealth do, but we're trying to avoid those. So.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Emily.
Is there a motion to go out of work session?
So moved.
Second.
Madam Secretary, call roll, please.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Mr. Wojciechowski?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Chair King?
Aye.
7 ayes.
At this point, several members of the board have asked for a 10-minute break, so we're going to take a break and reconvene at 8:25. Board members, we are to the new business portion of our agenda, and we've got quite a few items under new business this evening. The first item is a resolution related to the former sheriff's office and the Flieger Annex building. This resolution was developed based on what appeared to be a consensus at the last meeting, but once the resolution, should it be motioned and seconded, we'll open up an opportunity for discussion.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it. We can talk about it.
For discussion.
Is there any discussion?
You want to go first, Mary?
Well, I'm really torn on this because I really, really like to preserve historical buildings, and I really am so respectful of what Bob has brought forward. And it's been really hard. I felt very torn about it, but looking at some kind of compromise, which is sort of before us, it would seem that maybe we could at least preserve and renovate the old sheriff's office if, in fact, the Flieger building were removed. And I think in previous conversations, part of the issue with renovating the sheriff's office was we needed a little bit more room than the present sheriff's office has. So that would be why we would need to have part of that room where the Flieger building is. So but I do feel really torn about it, and but I think that looks like a compromise. The problem is we don't have the money to really, I think, take that building and really make it the way it should be. I think that you could preserve the shell of it, but I think that if you really got in there and started working on making it so it could be whatever, office building, whatever, it's going to take a lot of money to make sure the floors are structured right so that they can hold equipment, that kind of thing. So we're really sort of between a rock and a hard place. The other thing is, if we go with this resolution, I had talked to Mr. Meadows about, can we take things out of the Fleeger building or take parts of it to use in some other way? That, like, I understand there's a chandelier there. I understand, there's a lot of woodworking. But right now, it seems with the lack of money that this seems to be a compromise. And that would be what I would say about it.
Supervisor Shepherd?
I've given it a lot of thought too, and one thing that sticks in my mind is even if we spent the money to fix it, it wouldn't be structurally sound enough to do what we wanted to do with it. The Fleeger building I'm speaking of. Keeping parts of it, I guess, maybe locating them somewhere else or in a new building would be an option. I think that's kind of my opinion.
Supervisor Bone?
Mr. Meadows, the money that was discovered by the treasurer, would that be available anytime soon? Is that above and beyond our budget?
I don't know that it would be available to appropriate in the near term, no.
How far into the future would it be required?
I know that we'll be reflecting that as we develop the fiscal year 2021 budget.
Have we received any more money than budgeted in this fiscal year?
I would have to discuss that with the budget manager. I'm sure in some areas we've done well, and then I'm sure in a few areas we're probably short. I couldn't answer that right off.
And Ms. Edmonds, you don't know? You wouldn't know? Yep. I would recommend that we pause and figure out if there is some extra monies available this fiscal year to pause and determine whether or not we're going to have the funds next year to preserve this building. At least not make a decision in the near term to jeopardize any options that we have in the not too distant, like in the next 6 months kind of thing. I don't think that that's too long. I know that, the rent for the magistrate's office and so on, it's pretty hefty, but, if tax is doing a good job, and maybe we'll find the money. So I would hate to make a final decision too soon. And I know that we've been talking about it for a long time, but tax has been working and doing a good job. So maybe we can find the money. That's where I am.
Thank you. Supervisor Tuck?
Well, this process, I've learned a lot. I had a citizen who sent me some information about William Preston, and I'm a history major. I've lived here all my life. I've enjoyed history, and so he sent me information about William Preston and how in 1831 he submitted and was able, through a little use of Robert's Rules of Order, to be able to get an Emancipation Proclamation to end slavery in 1831. That was debated, and he talked about that slaves were human beings and that as a state we could free them. Pretty powerful words. After that debate and after losing that, obviously he lost it, he left politics for about 8 years. And I don't know if that had any effect on it. I haven't been able to tell, losing that debate. But that became his law office, and then he went on to become Secretary of the Navy, and the like, and did get back into politics, and as he also became a senator in the Confederate Senate. So you had somebody, one hand, who was moving to free the slaves in 1831, and somebody who was part of the Confederacy and government in the 1800s before he passed away. I want to save the sheriff's office for various reasons. Logically, I can look at it and say we can save money and preserve history. That makes sense. I do think we need to move forward on that quickly based on the presentation on the sheriff's office and do that renovations and preserve the roof before there's any more damage. Trying to be logical and not as emotional as I would like to be in looking at, I have a love of history. Mary has a love of animals, and everybody brings something different to the table, and I look at that building and I start thinking about how difficult those choices William Preston made. Maybe preserving that history, and at the same time knowing we don't have a use for it. We're going to spend thousands of dollars. And I appreciate the estimates that Mr. Poff has given us, but I don't know that these estimates are realistic, and that we would be spending taxpayer money to the tune of probably hundreds of thousands of dollars in my mind to preserve and utilize that building. So this is a very difficult decision for me. I appreciate what Mary said. I wouldn't mind postponing it because that maybe means that you could postpone it till around January. I hear y'all have some free time on your budget. But part of my job is to make tough decisions, and I think the tough decision and the right logical decision is to preserve the sheriff's building, but we don't have a use for the Fligger building, and then logically we need to tear it down.
Thank you, sir. Supervisor Steve.
I look at it a little bit differently. I think there is a need to act on it fairly quickly. We have police officers that are putting themselves in bad situations in our current setup with the magistrate's office. I don't think anybody on this board would want to hear that somebody got injured over there or worse. We've already had an incident over there that was bad enough, which caused a manhunt that I think lasted 2 or 3 days or whatever to secure a prisoner. So I think urgency is there. As far as the building itself, I haven't heard anybody remind us that we never, in our looking at what to do with the properties, considered the Fligger building because of the shape that it's in. We did consider the sheriff's office building, but now we have new information on the sheriff's office building. I think both those buildings contain some surprises, and not in the way of like a chest of gold doubloons or something buried in the basement. I think it's going to be more like black mold and other issues, and I think they're going to turn into money pits, and they won't know until they get started on it, and then that's, again, money wasted. And I think to be responsible to the taxpayers, I think both buildings need to be removed, and we need to build something that is going to last, that is going to be designed for the purpose and not the opposite way. Because even if we save the sheriff's office, we have to fit the square peg into the round holes in that building. It's not made for what the purpose that we want it to serve. So I really think that in the end, we would be much better off to take both buildings down.
I actually agree with you 100%, Supervisor Fidzikowski. But I also do agree with Supervisor Biggs and Supervisor Tuck in that I think that there is the need for a purpose-built building to serve court services in the magistrate's office, but I also think that preserving the historic nature of at least the sheriff's office accomplishes some good in a very, very difficult decision to make. So I think that the combination of the preservation of the old sheriff's office, the demolition of the Flieger building is actually a reasonable compromise. I agree with you completely, Supervisor Fidzikowski, that there is a lot of urgency because I do think we have a safety issue in front of us that we need to address. I also think that the issue of dealing with these structures has been delayed for quite a long time before coming to this point tonight. It's something that has been considered by past boards before I was here, before any of us were here. It's something that has been talked about for a very long time. I mean, the building was built in 1812, I believe. 12. And so, you know, we're 200 years now in the future considering what to do with these buildings. So I do think we have given reasonable time to consider what to do with these two structures. I do agree with you, Steve, but I am willing to vote in favor of a compromise to preserve the old sheriff's office and demolish the Flieger building.
Thank you. Since I got on this board, I've been talking about where the magistrate office is now. We're paying rent, and as Steve says, you know, it's a safety issue down there. Magistrate needs to be closer to the courthouse and the jailhouse. I've talked to several people about these two buildings. I understand that on one side people want us to save these buildings. I understand that. I'm an antique shopper myself. I like to go to antique stores. I think, as Vice Chair Mott says, you know, we have to compromise on some things. And as a board member, we're going to have to make that tough decision. And I think we need to do it tonight because if we're going to save the old sheriff's office, we got to do something with the roof and heat and air. If not, we're going to spend more money doing other things. And I also think, you know, we asked the school board, renovate some of your buildings instead of build new. And that's what they decided to do on the Christiansburg strand. And I appreciate that. My job as a supervisor is to look over taxpayers' money. It's not mine, it's the taxpayers. And I have to answer to them for how I spend it. So I'm looking for a compromise. Anybody else have something else they'd like to say?
I'll just address the sheriff's office, which I didn't. I'll remind you all of our work session we had over at the Animal Care and Adoption Center, and all of us kind of agreed to that all the buildings need to come down and build new, except one of us. And that being said, I'm willing to compromise. Is there any way we can find out if there's any serious internal damage to the sheriff's office because of moisture?
That was a question that I asked at the previous meeting's work session, specifically related to mold due to water infiltration where there's areas of the roof that are damaged. And just in my experience with property management and building maintenance and upkeep, we'll know when we get the roof off, which I think speaks to Steve's concerns about we are not going to find any chests of gold, but we could find other problems when we begin renovating that structure, if we begin renovating that structure.
One of the things, so during that same work session, we increased the cost to address some of that, and we still have roughly, even if you factor in the increased cost, around $500,000 of savings. So even if we run into some pretty serious issues with the sheriff's office, we could address that, and it wouldn't be a building that was exactly designed for what we're talking about. But I would also say, look at the renovations that have taken place out at Auburn, at the old high school to the middle school. That looks fantastic. And hopefully that we could look at something like that for this building.
That's true, and I appreciate you bringing that up. And like I say, I'm willing to compromise.
Yeah, because, you know, the renovations can be done to meet your needs. I mean, they really can. You hire someone that can do that. And then if we need a little bit more property, it would be available to add on to the current sheriff, the old office.
I especially like your suggestion, Supervisor Biggs, at examining what exists within the building, the chandelier, some of the woodwork.
Whatever we could
things like that
preserve.
that could be extracted from that building and either repurposed or possibly donated to the Montgomery Museum or in some way preserved for the future.
I would like to compromise to a point where we preserve the sheriff's office. You know, what we did was take some of our residents' money because they offered it up to check out the Flieger building, and we found out that it was better than we thought it was going to be. Chances are we're going to possibly find out that the sheriff's office is going to be better. 2, how do we know unless we do that? If it's worth $5,000 or $10,000 to just investigate, but I agree. I would like to make sure that that roof is taken care of as soon as possible. I mean, it's silly that we wouldn't do that, but does that mean we have to rush to judgment when we're not fully informed about the contents of that sheriff's building? Now, in the Flieger building, they said that the bones were good. I mean, of course I understand, Supervisor Fichkowski, that, you know, who knows what we're going to find when we start digging in the Flieger building or the sheriff's office or anything like that. But often, when the bones are pretty good, you can probably work around the issues. They would have found big issues in the Flieger building. So I think it's worth, you know, moving forward, taking one step at a time, preserving that roof on the sheriff's building, and I think that there's an opportunity for potentially a different design altogether, because all this time we've been figuring that we were going to tear down the Flieger building, and now we know that it's actually better than we thought it was going to be. So maybe we can still preserve at least some of it. And that's what I would like to at least take some time to figure out, is preserve the sheriff's building roof, and potentially find another solution that could meet our needs even better. And it doesn't necessarily have to take years. It can take months. And if we can preserve more than what we're potentially talking about right now, I think it's worth the extra months. That's where I am.
As somebody that is very familiar with the Flieger building, because that's where the magistrate's office used to be for many years, and I had the honor and pleasure of going in and out of it quite a bit, and I stand on what I say about the Flieger building. I just don't think that it's going to work out for what our needs are. But if you remember the design that Thompson Litton came out with, if they renovate the old sheriff's office, they want to put the magistrate as far away from the jail as possible. I don't see how that would work. I don't see how that's going to improve safety to the point where it's going to be at the best for our officers. To make it the safest, you should be walking your prisoner out of the magistrate's office directly into that jail. That's what I envision. But by redoing the old sheriff's office building, that's not going to happen unless we go back and we redesign the whole thing all over again. And if that's the case, I would push that we build the magistrate's office onto the jail. And that's not cheap, because I know that's been looked into before. So I mean, we have an opportunity to wipe the slate clean and put up exactly what we need. And I think that's what we should do. We should stick to our plan.
But you're not getting exactly what you need.
With a brand new building, we would.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any more discussion? Ready? Madam Secretary, call roll, please.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Mr. Chakowski?
Aye.
Ms. Demont?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Bowden?
No.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Chair King?
Aye.
6 ayes, 1 no.
Board members, item B on the agenda this evening under new business is a request for personal property tax exemption for advanced home care. At your last meeting, you had indicated by consensus that there was not a consensus to approve this, so this is a resolution denying the application.
Oh, there it is.
Any discussion? I need a motion.
So moved. Second.
Now, any discussion? Madam Secretary, call roll, please.
Mr. Chakowski?
I got a question on this. Sure. Are we voting to deny?
Yes.
Yes. Aye.
Yes. Resolution is
Clarification.
Ms. Demont?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Bowden?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Chair King?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Item C under new business this evening is a resolution denying the personal property tax exemption request from Christian Scholars Network Incorporated. This follows along with the last one. The board did not support granting tax exemption for this property, so this resolution is denying their request for tax exemption.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Madam Secretary, call roll, please.
Ms. Demont?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Bowden?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Mr. Chakowski?
Aye.
Chair King?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Board members, item D under new business is an ordinance for the renewal of AFD number 1.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Madam Secretary, call roll, please.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Bowden?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Mr. Chakowski?
Aye.
Ms. Demont?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Chair King?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Item E under new business this evening is an ordinance renewing Agricultural and Forestal District number 2.
So moved.
Second. Third.
Is there any discussion? Madam Secretary, call roll, please.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Mr. Chakowski?
Aye.
Ms. Demont?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Ms. Bowden?
Aye.
Chair King?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Item F on the agenda this evening is an ordinance renewing AFD number 15.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Madam Secretary, call roll, please.
Ms. Demont?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Bowden?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Mr. Chakowski?
Aye.
Chair King?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Board members, item G is a retainer agreement related to opioid litigation. This resolution authorizes the county to enter into a retainer agreement with Sanford Heisler Sharp LLP to represent the county in investigating and prosecuting legal action against J&J defendants for the costs the county has incurred as a result of the opioid epidemic.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Madam Secretary, call roll, please.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Bowden?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Mr. Chakowski?
Aye.
Ms. Demont?
Aye.
Chair King?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Item H on new business this evening is to add to the VDOT 6-year secondary road improvement plan, Poplar Hollow Road.
Make the motion. Second.
Is there any discussion? Madam Secretary, call roll, please.
Ms. Bowden?
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Ms. Demont?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Mr. Chakowski?
Aye.
Chair King?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Item I on the agenda this evening under new business is to add to the VDOT 6-year secondary road improvement plan, Union Valley Road.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Madam Secretary, call roll, please.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Tuck?
Aye.
Fidzikowski?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Biggs?
Aye.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Chair King?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Last item under new business this evening is a proclamation. This was discussed at the last board meeting related to Columbus Day and the opportunity to proclaim the second Monday in October also as Indigenous Peoples Day. Staff put together a resolution for your consideration and discussion this evening.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Yes. I've been looking into this, and first of all, I want to say I think it's a great idea that we make a county holiday. Our county history includes Native Americans, and I think it's great that we do something to recognize them. In my looking into Indigenous Peoples Day, though, I found that there's a lot of controversy over the words Indigenous people. Some people like it, some people don't like it. The fact that it's on the same day as Columbus Day, some people like it, some people don't like it. It seems to be kind of controversial. So I was thinking about it, and I read that every November, the governor of Virginia makes November the Native, and I'm going to get this wrong unless I read it. And I didn't write it down. Good for me. I think it's either Native American Month or Native Virginian Month, and I thought that would be a perfect place to put our holiday, is right in there. And since Thanksgiving falls on the fourth Thursday, I thought it would be nice to put that holiday on the Friday after Thanksgiving, so that they're kind of tied together. You know, the atrocities that were committed against Native Americans were horrible. I mean, they were here, they owned the land, and they were run off. And I don't know how we could ever make that better by eliminating one holiday and replacing it with the other. But when you read about Thanksgiving, and you read about how the Pilgrims and the tribe of Indians there, which, even though my last name's Fidzikowski, I can't pronounce this one. But at any rate, it wasn't just a meal. I mean, they had a meal, lasted 3 days, and then they did it again. And they remained close and worked together for, I think history records it as 50 years. And then I guess everything went south. But that's kind of a good time to remember, where there was cooperation between Pilgrims and the Indian tribe that was there at the time. So I would like to see if we could maybe amend it and maybe get more bang for our buck out of that holiday.
Mr. Chair, I would just like to say I really like that idea. It spells out Native Americans. There's no other day on there. It's not taken away from anybody. It's only adding to and drawing attention to Native Americans. I think that would be a nice thing to do. I checked with the county administrator. That is a state holiday that is utilized. It coincides with that month. It coincides with Thanksgiving, and in my mind, it's perfect. And I think that we could become a leader on this issue. Not to be controversial, but rather to recognize that and to utilize that day and to maybe bring things together, and rather than create any controversies. And so I would support Supervisor Fidzikowski's motion in regards to doing that. Or amendment, excuse me.
I think since Supervisor Bone brought this up, I mean, that would be, to me, I'm just speaking for me now, that would be your decision.
So I have a question to Supervisor Fidzikowski and perhaps Supervisor Tuck. have you gotten any feedback from your constituents or Montgomery County residents specifically about this actually being a controversial proposal?
No. But it's been in the news, I think it was October the 14th. Let me see, CNN said, to recognize the native populations that were displaced and decimated after Christopher Columbus and other European explorers reached the continent. And then NPR reported on 10/14 that several other places across the United States have also made the switch in a growing movement to end the celebration of the Italian explorer in favor of honoring indigenous communities and their resiliency in the face of violence by European explorers like Christopher Columbus.
But I'm not proposing replacing at all.
Yes, I do understand that.
Okay.
But as Supervisor Tuck said, by making it its own separate holiday, draws more attention to it, I think.
What I particularly like about having it on Columbus Day is that most communities throughout the United States do it then also. I'd like to celebrate at the same time as opposed to having a separate date that may not be celebrated nearly as much.
Do you know how many states and cities celebrate Indigenous Peoples' Day?
Not off the top of my head, but I do know a fair amount. So.
Would you say it's half of the states?
No, I don't think so.
Would you say it's 25% of the states?
I would say that hundreds of governments celebrate them. And I believe that we could be a notable addition to that and a leader in our community. You know, like you said, it's very important to celebrate the indigenous people. And I'm not looking to be controversial. I just felt like there was enough momentum that we could make it our own on the day that most people who celebrate it. And that's what I feel would be most meaningful. So no, I would not accept.
I think I take that as a no.
Yeah, I would not accept that change.
I'll just make one point. There's more businesses and things out on vacation on holiday that Friday after Thanksgiving than there are Columbus Day.
Yeah, and I'm definitely not talking about retail. You know, I'm just
I'm
talking.
not either, but schools.
Yeah.
There's schools that are in service.
Sure,
on
sure.
Columbus Day.
I just think that there's a great opportunity that we have before us.
Any more discussion?
You know, I'm thinking about what Supervisor Glenn said. Like I said, I don't necessarily want to conform with what everybody else is doing. I'd rather be our own. And I'm trying to look at, yes, there are folks that are going to celebrate it on Columbus Day, but why was that day selected?
Well, I mean...
To be Indigenous Day, why, can you tell me, why was that day selected?
It's my understanding that it makes a lot of sense that, sure, people recognize that Christopher Columbus started the European, I don't know if you really want to call about it as an invasion, right? But it's more about celebrating those people that have been forgotten on that day as a result of that action.
Right. To achieve that goal, is it better to put it on a date that is Columbus Day, or is it better to put it on a date that there's nothing else there and it's a holiday and it achieves that goal and we recognize it and we put it on our calendars as just that day? Or is it just because of that controversy
It has nothing to do with the controversy. I am not bringing it forward because of the controversy.
But no, I'm saying the
bringing
selection of that day.
I'm bringing it forward for that particular day so that we can celebrate with our brothers and sisters across the United States when most are celebrating the exact same thing. That's where I am coming from.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to call the question, please.
Yes, ma'am.
But I want to know what's on the floor.
To proclaim the second Monday in October as Indigenous Peoples' Day.
Right, but then,
She didn't
But
accept
She didn't
it.
accept
Okay.
the friendly
So,
amendment.
yeah,
But
but-
it's not to name it that because it's sharing the day with Columbus. And I know that's the way the resolution appears on, but if you read the text of the resolution, it doesn't say it replaces it. And I know the way, if you just look at it the way it appears on our agenda without reading the resolution, I made the same, and it initially when it said replaced,
It's not
that
replaced.
but because I don't think we can. I think
Right.
Because it's a
Right.
state
it's a federal holiday and a
Right.
state holiday.
It says,
So-
whereas Montgomery County also desires to recognize the second Monday of October as Indigenous Peoples' Day.
Also, yeah, the
Yes.
words also. And I know you made a callable question, but I did have, but never mind.
okay.
Madam Secretary, call roll, please.
Mr. Tuck?
No.
Mr. Fidzikowski?
No.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Ms. Spears?
Aye.
Ms. Bone?
Hi.
Mr. Shepherd?
No.
Chair King?
Aye.
4 ayes, 3 no.
Mr. Chair, that's it for the agenda. We're down to reports.
We're down to a good report. County Attorney's report.
I will, I have no report.
Come on.
County Administrator's report.
One item this evening, I'm going to pass down a letter that I received right before the last board meeting from Kelly Scott in our Cooperative Extension Office downstairs. This relates to the recent drought and weather-related issues that the farmers have had related to weather. If you look down towards the bottom of that first page, Ms. Scott says, I would suggest contacting local farm service agency county committee, asking them to implement actions that would open USDA relief programs. Wanted to make you aware of this and just make sure I had consensus to reach out to these folks, or county staff has consensus to reach out. When Kelly and I talked about this a week or so ago, there was some thought about still considering a drought disaster declaration by the county. However, it has started to rain finally. It's going to continue to rain, I hope. However, if declaring a drought declaration for the period of time prior to these recent rains will help our farmers, we will bring something back before you to consider, but I want to consult with
That's good.
USDA, and so I wanted to share that with you to make sure you guys were, the board was okay with me moving forward with that.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay, very good. And that's all I have.
Bless your heart. Supervisor Tuck.
Well, I've got a favor to ask of y'all. I have had a jury trial get moved to basically the Tuesday after VACO, and normally we would have dinner, we'd have the sessions all the way through. This is a very serious matter involving sexual assault with an individual who has no criminal record and maintains his innocence. And not to any choice, and I pointed out to the judge that I might not be available. It got moved up from late November until that day. I had made reservations, planned on going, and was hoping to be able to bring back something similar to when we had that broadband application, where we were able to at least apply for a $1 million grant. We didn't get it, but at least we found out about it. With that being said, whomever was to win my seat, I was going to ask if this board would support, whether it be Mr. Lawson or Ms. Blevins, if they could have the opportunity to go in my stead. I've got to admit, I don't want to miss it. I'd hope that there might be some ways to work that case out. It does not look like that is the case. And so basically, I'm looking, I've talked with Vicki, the reservation could be changed to whomever's name. Obviously, we'd be going to VACO after the fact, and whether that be Mr. Lawson or Mrs. Blevins, either one of them. So I guess I'm looking to ask your support to make sure that everyone's okay with that. And I would also point out, when I got elected, immediately after I got elected, even in November and December, I was made part of the closed sessions, and it helped me bring up to speed. I think by one of these folks going, either one, it would give them, one, an opportunity to learn a lot of things at VACO. There are a lot of presentations. It's an opportunity to them to really learn. But then on top of that, there's those evenings when you're sitting around and you're talking, and it would give you the chance to get to know either whoever won that election. And so I think there's some advantage to that, and so I would ask you to support that decision.
I would be in support of that as long as we confirmed with VACO that that was acceptable. And then we might also, I don't know, with it being an election and two different people on the ballot, I don't know how we would confirm with the candidates that they would be available.
Just that they would be, the opportunity's there for them. And if that works out, that's great. For either one, it's in my district, and so either one of those candidates that would, whoever would won, it may not work with their schedules. Both of them own individual businesses. And I imagine they've been neglecting those businesses as they've led up to the election a little bit, but it would give them that, afford them that opportunity.
Well, I think you make a valid point that it allows whomever is elected the opportunity to gain some education, which is incredibly important, and also begin building relationships with the colleagues that they would be working on this board, and I think that that is also very valuable. I don't have personally a problem with it as long as it is not in any type of violation of the Virginia Association of Counties rules. I would just want to check that one thing and make sure it would be okay with VACO.
We can do that.
And Mary, you might have some insight into that.
I don't think it would be a violation. I mean, we can definitely check that, and I think it's good to, well, you know me, because I'm a VACO commercial. It's good to get involved in VACO as soon as possible. I know I was encouraged when I first, got on the board to do that. And it's a little bit different with Chris's situation because he won't be returning to the board. And that's a little bit different than District D because, we don't know, what. So I can support that. I think that would be okay.
Yeah, and I would also ask our county administrator if that's, is that something that's doable with the county also?
Yes.
Then I would
Certainly.
definitely support that. I think just like everybody else here, once we were elected, we were brought into the fold and we were given, information and told what was going on with different issues, and that helped me, I know, to understand.
Yeah, it
what
helps
I
you
was
start
getting
serving
into, so.
in January with more.
And the tradition has always been, as long as I've been a board member, that whoever wins the election is brought in for closed meeting. They receive all the information that we would receive, and they come into closed meeting.
That's, and that was a sad part of my report to present because I really was looking forward to going. I was hoping that to learn and bring something back, but thank you for supporting that decision. Appreciate it.
That all?
That's it.
Supervisor Steve.
I don't have any report, but I am looking forward to going to the VACO convention.
Supervisor Biggs.
I just have two things to make you aware of. The Race for ACE committee that I served on last year, we are meeting on November 7th to get this year's Race for ACE plan. And you can put on your calendar that will happen on Saturday, May 9th, 2020. And hope, that we can have good attendance at that. And then the resolution that we signed tonight for the New River Valley Community Services Board, as you know, they're celebrating their 50th anniversary. So on December 5th, which is a Thursday, you all are going to be receiving an invitation to come over to the Radford Center, which is the old Wade's building, and help and celebrate with them. It will be at 5 o'clock. So I wanted to bring that to your attention, those 2 dates.
What was the race praise date again, Supervisor Biggs?
The May 9th.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Supervisor Bone.
I just want to thank my fellow supervisors for being thoughtful about the Indigenous Peoples Day, even though we couldn't come to a full agreement. I appreciate you considering it. Thank you.
And I'm glad it passed.
Thank you.
Supervisor Shepherd.
And I'm glad it passed too. I really want to see it happen. I'll just follow up a little bit on Craig's comments about the farmers in the area. I am friends with several of those farmers. Some of them have a few cattle and raise hay to sell. Some of them only raise hay to sell. And they haven't had any, and they've had multiple people come to them begging for hay because they've already started feeding their cattle. I mean, weeks ago, because there's no grass. That's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Vice Chair DeMott.
No report.
Are you kidding me?
I'm not kidding.
No biscuits or anything?
Get that. Did you write me that thing down? Appreciate it, sir.
Thanks, Mark.
Uh-oh.
Delivery by the sheriff here.
Yeah. Just, and I appreciate you doing that for me. Just a reminder for people to go on the website and vote for the sheriff's office.
Oh, yeah, I've been doing
They're
that.
trying to get a K-9 grant. Go to their Facebook page and you can find a link.
I can vote every day.
Every 24 hours, right?
Yeah.
Until November the 3rd.
Yeah.
So I would encourage everybody to do that, help them out. I mean, I know they support their communities, and we do appreciate everything that y'all do. So now's the time for us to support them in a different way. And I do want to tell everybody that this board we thought about this Fligger building a whole lot. We have. We discussed it openly. We did probably discuss it over the telephone. And I mean, it's been weighing on us. That was not an easy decision.
No.
And maybe once we move forward with this old sheriff's department and, you know, the front of it can look the way it needs to look, and hopefully that we won't have a big decision like this for the rest of the year.
You'll never know.
It goes off in January.
With that being said, I do appreciate everybody coming out, and I do appreciate the treasurer for all your hard work. Thank you for the report tonight. It was very good. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.